Welcome back to Church is Canceled. I'm your co-host, Brett, and I'm joined today by my co-host, always aptly named for the episode we're about to enter. Today is Zero Kids.
Yeah.
What up, Zero Kids?
Hey, what's going on? Enter is the right word. We're going to enter this one.
God.
Yeah, so today we are talking about the Josh Duggar Scandalous, such a terrible word for this, just atrocity. And for those of you unfamiliar, Josh Duggar got his start on the learning channels. I think it started out as 12, 13 kids and counting. I think it started out as that.
Something like that, yeah.
And by their last season, they had 20 kids. So, all right. Somebody's entering somebody, and I'm just going to say it was his parents. All right. So what do you have for us today?
Oh, man. So, usually we start off with our Christian cliche of the week.
It's a church cliche, or sometimes we do a piece of advice. But today we have something different for you. What do you got?
I've got something a little bit different there, Zero Kids. I visited a church last weekend.
And you burned on impact, like just entering the door.
No, they let me sit in the back. I had to sit in the back, and two security guards stood immediately behind me on either side the entire time, but I was allowed in. I went to a Brazilian church with my wife.
And they thought you were Argentinian, so they made you sit in the back. Okay.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, my complexion doesn't really pass for a Brazilian, especially with my added height.
Yeah, but you could be an Argentine for sure. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So I won't say the name of the church to protect us from potential lawsuits. We've got enough pending as it is. So.
Hey, man, we settled those two out of court, okay?
2 of 4, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a very famous Brazilian church that has a campus in Orlando. There's a campus in Tampa where I am, but I think their biggest U.S. location is in Orlando. And let me say this, as much as I criticize when I walk into a church and I see the fog machines and it was fucking foggy the whole time. Yeah. God damn, if you were a weatherman there, you would have been having a fucking field day.
But it's a Brazilian church, so it's got to be like the favelas. Like, they're always foggy because they're on fire all the time.
This was nothing like a favela. They had on either side of the pews. Stadium. Yeah. It actually was. It wasn't like a tiered level. They didn't have that. It was all flat, just seats, all the way up to the front.
So it was like a $2 theater instead of like a...
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking. It had to be. I mean, a football field or close to a football field in length, so 100 yards, or give or take. And they had. It wasn't screens, multiple TV screens. They somehow got one long-ass fucking screen to cover the entire wall on each side of the church. A screen, like a 100-yard long screen that went floor to ceiling on both sides. And as much as I like to criticize that, all this extra shit that I think we don't need in churches, it was pretty badass, I gotta say. They had images up the whole time to get you in the feels and stuff, to manipulate you emotionally. The images made no sense. It was like pictures of white guys who look like me in Roman soldier gear. Don't know what was going on, but I loved it. I loved that part for sure.
Throughout the course of doing this podcast, all of the things that I still criticize have become like the things that I love now. It's like, no, I go to a stadium every Saturday night and I fight people to park. And they fill this place with 4,000 people on a Saturday night. And I'm like, manipulate me, daddy. Manipulate me, please. Because guess what? I'm getting manipulated, or people are, every other entity on the face of this earth is attempting to manipulate me, including what I presume are satanic ones. So please, church, manipulate me as best as you can. I'm here for it now. So...
That was just the beginning. I realized we had been in this church for over an hour.
Right.
And the Bible had only been quoted once. And I was like, this truly is, I'm just at a concert. I'm at a Christian music concert.
To be
The
fair,
Bible has been referenced one time.
or is it that they're a Brazilian brand appealing to an American audience? And they've
No,
been
it was all
gentrified.
in Portuguese. The entire service was in Portuguese.
Okay.
I didn't
Well,
understand, I understood 5% of it with my
welcome
in
to going to.
progress
Hey,
Portuguese learning.
that's about as much Malayalam as I speak, and I went to a Malayalam only church till I was like 13. So I
But
was 20 before I figured out the New and Old Testament were two different deals. So,
I understood the prayer,
right.
this 30-minute long prayer that the guy gave before the offering. This is just the offering prayer. Before they do the offering, a guy prays over the offering to try to multiply it or make it bigger or whatever to make sure the church gets as much money as possible that's tax-free. So he goes and he's 30 minutes into his prayer for the offering, and this guy starts praying, for my understanding of Portuguese, very culturally contextualized. He starts praying for green cards and visas to be approved as part of his offering.
I stand in agreement with that prayer, and if I can be a part of that, if you're between the ages of 19 and 22, and you are a Brazilian national seeking American citizenship, I'm here for you, babe. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. So today, I think I mentioned we are talking about the.
I'm not even done yet. That wasn't all the shit that happened, bro. That wasn't even it. So after the offering, they put up the announcements.
Correct.
They, no joke, had a video advertisement for an oil diffuser embedded in their announcements.
No.
Like, we got this conference coming up, this one, and buy this fucking oil diffuser.
Now, let me just say something. If there's two things on this planet that I love, it's the Lord, his bride, the church, and it's capitalism. But never the two shall meet. Okay? We have to draw the line somewhere. In pitching oil diffusers, listen, when the lady at church pitches the oil diffuser to you, when you talk about your financial anxiety, that's one thing. But when they do it from the announcement screen.
Right from the announcements. My wife said after the church, I thought it was really funny. She said, I wouldn't be surprised if pretty soon they just start charging cover just to get in and attend the church service.
Do you remember a church in Minnesota called, I can just say the name Upper Room?
Yes.
Okay.
Never went, but heard plenty about it.
So in that church, when it first came into my consciousness, I explained to someone like this was like going to a nightclub, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" This church at that time met at Christ Presbyterian at 7:00 on Sundays. I told my buddy it's like going to a nightclub. He didn't believe me. He comes with me, and we go there. And you have to we get there at 6:30. You have to go up to the balcony because it's already full on the main floor, and we see a girl wearing wedges and a glittery a short dress. I forget what. There's a
cocktail dress.
Yeah, it's not a maxi dress. It's a mini dress. That's what it's called. A full glitter mini dress, and she's wearing these huge wedges. And he goes, "This is like a nightclub." And I said, "Why do you think I come here, bro? It's not for the sermons. Kurt Vickman's a nice guy, but listening to him deliver a sermon is painful." So he owns a grocery store for poors now, and I appreciate that. I love that for him.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. Last thing I picked up on, my wife has heard the gossips through the gossip trees. The lead pastor who delivered the sermon, of course, there's allegations he has group sex with men, and then also that
are there women there?
No,
is there women?
Dudes.
Okay.
No, just straight for the dudes. And that probably even worse than that he has received hair implants. And I said, well, thank God for the fucking hair implants, because Lord knows Jesus could not show up if that man was bald.
Right.
So.
I'm pretty sure there's a Bible verse about knocking bald men, so I'm going to skip over that one. But speaking of balding men, Josh Duggar.
Balding already? What is he, 35, 36 now?
I think the stress of whatever he has going on probably is not helping that hairline.
Prison is stressful, yeah.
So, like I said, the Duggar family is part of a weird movement called Quiverfull. So their concept is like the Catholics of old, which is no contraceptives. And so every time you pound your wife, if she gets pregnant, that's God's will. Now, I'm going to say this as a person of color. Society needs more whites. The white race is doomed. I'm not even a minority, right? I'm Indian, and after India had about a year of lockdowns, we beat the 2030 estimate of being the world's largest population, and we did it 7 years early. So we're now the world's largest population.
Indians were fucking.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. Like, so I'm not even a minority. I'm a majority. You're in the minority. You won't have kids in the. I mean, your kids will be half majority. But I'm just saying, we need more whites. So I'm okay with this, with that part of it. But they have a lot of weird stuff that's about their theology, I guess, if you want to call it that. Before we jump into all of the grossness that is Josh Duggar's horrifying behavior,
criminal record,
the Institute for Basic Life Principles. Now,
Ibmp.
Here's my beef with a lot of these, they're non-denominational movements. Here's what they tried to do. They read the scripture, and they go, "Oh, there's a lot of." Some people would say complexity. I would say nuance. The scripture has a lot of nuance. And if you don't read Greek and Hebrew, that nuance is even furthered by historical realities, translation defects or differences. There's a lot of reasons. So I'll just use the word. Some people would say complexity. I would say nuance. And that nuance creates this gap where you go, wait, drinking alcohol isn't in there. It's drunkenness. How do you measure drunkenness? There's no black and white measure, biblically speaking, for drunkenness. So instead of talking about the nuance and helping people mature in their faith and reading the scripture and understanding, hey, you can basically do whatever you want. That doesn't mean it's good for you. That doesn't mean it's going to bring you close to God. That doesn't mean it's healthy for you.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's going to help you achieve what you want to achieve. And some of what you're permitted to engage in because you have free will is stuff that's going to make you sad. And if you want to give it a try, go for it. But if in the long run, and that's why I was at the beginning of this saying, yeah, manipulate me. That's fine. Like, please manipulate my emotions, is because isn't it all a manipulation? Right? I'd rather be manipulated into peace and happiness than perpetual anxiety. So if we're going to do some manipulating, let's manipulate things in the correct direction. But what a lot of, and I'll use this word in our parlance, religious Christians, people who participate in Christianity as a dead religion. How many times have you ever heard that from your hipster pulpit at your church?
Well, I don't go to church, but if I did, I see what you're saying.
When you went, you animal, you've heard that phrase, right? We don't want to just be a dead religion. We want to celebrate the living God. Fair enough? You've heard something like that?
Yeah.
Well, IBOP and groups like it, and there are plenty, they try to simplify things by just saying a list of do's and don'ts, right?
Right.
And there's a whole verse in the Bible about false prophecy and how false prophets will come. Now, I'm not making any sort of accusation. I'm just leaving it up to the listener to go, if the Bible tells us you can do certain things, but it's bad for you, and you just tell people you can't do these things that are bad for you, but they're never going to know why. aren't we false prophesying? Isn't that the wrong thing to do?
Maybe.
All right.
What I found interesting about the IBLP as I did some research is I read, as you had mentioned, they did things like, they've been referred to as a cult by many others. I think that's fair. But at the same time, I read they avoid TV, secular radio, alcohol, dating, and public schools. And people go, whoa, that's a cult. And I go, oh, that just sounds like the Assemblies of God University I went to. Seriously, though, it's
okay, but the
not
difference is,
dissimilar from the experience that I had in the AG.
okay,
And
but to be fair, I went to an AG church for a while, right?
mm-hmm.
Those chicks were wearing low-cut shirts, and they were out there with it, right? Whereas these girls are making their own denim skirts. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's more in line with a lot of the Pentecostal cultural experiences. The long skirts, the modest clothing. We don't read Harry Potter. We don't listen to Jay-Z, all that shit. And I
don't do any of those things either. So I'm always dressed modestly. My cleavage is never out.
That's not true.
One time.
So I could relate to the IBLP. The thing is, when you're in a part of a community, when you are a part of a community like that, the outside world says, well, that's a cult. You don't see it that way when you're on the inside. What you think is, no, we know the truth and everyone else is wrong. And everyone else has been tricked by the devil. And they're all evil. And they are satanic forces and things like that. That's a little bit extreme, but it's true. They're under the spell of the enemy. Some might say there's spiritual warfare when you listen to that secular music that tells you to disobey your parents.
Correct.
So that is not an uncommon experience, but it sounds like the IBLP was a little bit more extreme with it. I like what you're saying. What I hear you saying is that, they took what they read to say, hey, these are some things that, you have the grace of God to do, but may not behoove you to do them.
Right.
May be bad for you. Instead, they just said, you can't do any of this stuff. We're going to make it easy. We're going to make it plain for you. It sounds to me like just what the Pharisees did when they took the law of Moses and tacked on all this extra shit to make it way more complicated. They did it because they loved God and they wanted to follow the law. So they added all these extra things. They said, well, if we build these extra laws and barriers in, we'll never get too close to even sinning because we're doing all this extra stuff. We're so far away from it. But part, in my opinion, why Jesus comes is to abolish that. And to, again, say, no, the law is no longer necessary. It is fulfilled in me. But now I do think today we have a lot of churches, especially organizations like the IBLP, who come to be the second coming of the Pharisees and say, let's add more laws, let's be more prohibitive and more punitive as well.
And what I would also tack on to that is, there was a line in one of the episodes where the mom, I forget her name, and not that
Anna,
no, that's not the mom. I think that's the Duggar's wife. I'm talking about Josh.
Jim Bob's wife.
Yeah, I don't know that she even gets a name in the show, nor does she deserve one. She's a woman. I'm surprised they even show her face. We don't need to hear from her. But she makes mention of, and she wasn't raised like this, and I don't think Jim Bob was either. I think they mentioned that Jim Bob bought a leather jacket and drove a Trans Am and realized it was satanic because it had the flaming bird on the hood, so he just decided to stop doing that. Guy heard one AC/DC song and took it too far. But she made mention of some show. I watched one or two of the episodes once when I was in the hospital before any of this amounted to whatever the scandal was. And she said something along the lines of, they say we don't let our kids have their own personality, but I look at the kids at public schools and it's not like they're unique and different. They're just one of another part of a different group.
That's true.
And that gets back to what I was trying to say at the beginning, which is it's all
a manipulation.
It's all a manipulation. Now, as we get into this scandal, what's the one verse in every one of these episodes that I keep bringing up or I keep quoting?
Whatever is done in the darkness shall be brought to the light.
Okay. So groups like the IBLP and other groups like them, I'm not whatever picking on them specifically. They have this thing about shame, and shame is part of their culture. I don't believe shame's from God. I believe there's corrective elements in our culture.
Well, don't let our sponsor, The Power of Shame, hear you say that, because they're a good sponsor and we want to have them back on.
Of course. They're not sponsoring us today. But that's voluntarily engaging in shame. That's a little different than what's happening here.
Okay.
What happens is they don't want, and this is something I'm deeply familiar with. I deeply understand this because of how I grew up. When something bad happens, they close ranks. When somebody within their group, and they're almost like the mafia in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody whacks somebody, they're like, oh no, we're all going to go down for this, right? So because we knew that, this was going to happen, whatever. So they close ranks and they try to cover it up. And I always get back to this thing of like, hey, from the very first scandal we did, which was Mars Hill, the Bible, okay? Now, it's in there that if you try to cover it up, we're all going to find out, all right?
Uh-huh.
Now, like Andrew Tate, Andrew Tate said the thing that made him stop being an atheist was that he saw how much sincere evil there was in the world. And similarly, for me, the thing that continues to push me towards the scripture and its validity isn't a lot of extraneous things. It's the fact that we do this every week almost, and every single week that Bible verse continues to be true of like, you can bang a hot Persian chick. You can bang a hot Persian chick that you meet in a park, but we're all going to hear about it eventually, right?
It's so true.
Like, hey, you can do meth with a gay stripper named Mike Jones, and we're all going to find out about it, right?
So if you don't want to end up talked about on this podcast, keep that verse in mind.
That's right. So we're going to jump into the meat of this story, the unfortunate meat of this story. Before we do that, I want to tell you about scriptural skinny jeans. Now, scriptural skinny jeans. Is this a new
sponsor?
Another new sponsor.
Oh, nice.
Scriptural skinny jeans are different than the other skinny jeans of other brands because woven inside of each pair of scriptural skinny jeans is the Bible verse, Romans 13, in the inseam. Okay? You're submitting yourself every time you wear these jeans is an act of submission to your local authorities. All right?
Beautiful.
You can go to scripturalskinnyjeans.com, use code CIC12, you get 12% off, 12 disciples, of which one Paul probably wasn't one because he came 100 years later, but we're not going to get into that now. But Scriptural Skinny Jeans is launching. You can get on the list for that. You can get on the pre-order list for their new product, Scriptural Yoga Pants. Now, the interesting part about Scriptural Yoga Pants is they are made for guys who go to church but also go to yoga classes.
Very progressive.
Very progressive. And within these jeans, they have a special pocket for your twig and berries, so that your glory is really supported.
So they're modest. They're scriptural and they're modest.
They're modest for most people, not for everybody, though. Let's just put it this way. If your name's Jamal, probably not modest. That's all I'm saying. So.
Thank you. So grateful to have that sponsor, Scriptural Skinny Jeans.
That's right. That is code CIC12. That is scripturalskinnyjeans.com, code CIC12. get 12% off your order, and you can go check that out today. Again, we're always grateful for All Pod Media, our network that brings us these amazing sponsors week after week after week, new sponsors. It's an incredible feat. We're a very small podcast, and we still have new sponsors every week. All right, well, let's take it away with the grossness. So this all starts.
Let's do it. How does it all start?
Well, it starts all the way back in 2002, so 20 years ago, because we're all old now. There's a 33-page police report that reveals that Jim Bob told the cops that his son.
Jim Bob?
Jim Bob would be Josh Duggar's father.
Good.
That Josh Duggar inappropriately fondled several young victims that were sleeping in the Duggar family home, which later is revealed that two of them are his sisters.
So. We talked just briefly. We talked a bit about the Ibmp.
Yep.
Let's tie this together. All right. Let's make this make sense. Why is this on Churches Canceled? Because neither Josh Duggar nor his father, Jim Bob, are pastors or ministers. They were just prominent figures, I guess. They were a part of the Ibmp, and because they had the TV show with all the kids, they could speak to the public about their somewhat fundamentalist views.
I don't know that they're fundamentalist in the Calvinist sense, but they're fundies for sure. They're fundamentalists of some variety. Josh Duggar goes on to, as an adult, doesn't go to Liberty University, incredibly. I don't know how that, probably too liberal for them. But he does go on to work for the Political Action Committee, sponsored by the Family Research Council, which is listen, I'm a libertarian. I have very traditional values, but I think trying to force Christian values into the law is the opposite of what we should be doing here. But that's neither here nor there. But that's where Josh Duggar goes to work. So this is Churches Canceled. And to say that these guys, that the Duggar family didn't at some point in time have a bigger reach than Joel Osteen is a ridiculous statement. They're a big deal. And I would say they're probably and they're probably a bigger deal to non-Christians than they are Christians. Is that, I don't know if that's because they were
a big deal to Christians, right? Because anytime a Christian person or someone loosely affiliated to Christianity gets famous or a celebrity claims Jesus, Christians jizz in their pants. So,
true. Hey, when Jim Caviezel said he was Catholic, I was like, cool, bro. That's awesome. So I guess you're right. I do that. I do exactly what you just said.
Everybody does it.
Yeah, because I found out one of my favorite comedians, a comedic actor, also is a Christian. He was just confused that he's like, what? Everybody doesn't do this? I was like, hey, one of us. But at least he didn't do any of this weird stuff. So I would say that, this definitely fits right into what we talk about here on the show. And so, so that happens in 2002. When Jim Bob at one point was a state senator or state congressman from Arkansas, he tries to go in 2002, he loses the primary bid, in which one of his policies is that the R word and the I word should be considered capital crimes. Okay. Siblings touching each other. But it's Arkansas, so how hard do you want to lean on that one? Probably why you lost your primary bid there. So, but basically what happens is, I don't really understand. There's small town relationship between the cops, and they reveal that basically Jim Bob gets this cop to yell at Josh and say,
Yeah.
"Don't
Joseph
think cop."
Hudgens, who
Right,
I've named myself after, was a state trooper.
right,
Arkansas state trooper who was friends with Jim Bob. He gets Jim Bob to lecture him and say, hey, we know you've had some inappropriate behaviors
right,
with young people.
right.
Josh at the time was young, was a teen, I think.
Correct, but I was also 14, and I was also a horn dog when I was 14. I'm in my 30s now, still a horn dog.
Yeah.
But at no point in time I was like, oh, here's I don't know. It's just too gross to even
Here's a
hypothetically.
family member. I
Nonetheless,
should do something.
yeah. And I would say this much also is being horny is just a part of life.
Right.
And being a horny 14-year-old boy, and listen, if you put so many constraints on a person, they're going to, like in Japan, for instance, the whole reason tentacle images are.
We're getting into tentacles.
Well, I'm just saying the reason that's a factor there isn't because the Japanese are like some out of the box wackos. It's because the normal stuff is illegal or harder to come by. And this is the best analog to the real thing. So I'm just saying it's good to set boundaries for children. I don't have any kids. It's good to tell them what's good and bad for them. But on some level, you got to assume your 15-year-old son is going to try to show somebody his pee-pee. And I would rather that be some girl from his youth group than someone in my household. Okay. If I have, listen, the great economist, I'm in the middle of writing a book, and I quote the great economist, Thomas Sowell. And he says this thing about there is no perfection on this earth. There's only trade-offs. And in life, we have to make trade-offs, even as Christians. We have to go, we have a carnal nature, and we want to do bad things. But we have to decide, are we going to do bad things or worse things or gross things or criminal things, right? So we have to decide, and sometimes you go, I'm going to pretend like I didn't just see Sally Sue lifting up her skirt and my son was up there. We're going to pretend like that didn't happen, or I'm going to yell at him, because that is so much more preferential than whatever happened here.
Yeah, and we're like kind of dancing around what happened because we want this episode to stay up when we upload it. So, I mean, more or less, there was inappropriate behavior between.
We could use words like grape. We could use words like SA, not like SA, not like SA. What's up, dog? Like the other kind, like SA.A, and CP. If you don't know what those initials are, don't Google them. Gonna go to prison.
So there's SA perpetrated by Josh against his sisters at a young age.
Yeah, and I think we can say fondled. He fondled. He did a little fondling.
Yeah. State trooper guy steps in.
Right.
Trooper Hutchins here, who I'm aptly named after, steps in and says, don't do that, or bad things are going to happen.
Yes.
Trooper Hutchins later goes to prison himself for being found with CP in his office.
At his sheriff's office.
At least.
Like his law enforcement office.
Yes, where he worked. Well, I don't know if it was home office or sure it just said office, but found with at least 37 images of very minor people. Yeah, so that guy went to prison for 15 years. The guy who was supposed to step in and help, and investigate, and he didn't. He didn't do anything. So there's some odd relationship, as you said, between law enforcement officials and Jim Bob being some type of politician, where son Josh doesn't get properly investigated or held accountable or really have any consequences for his actions.
Yeah, and I think he was required to go to somebody's ranch and dig up horse crap or something along those lines.
They said he did Christian counseling and manual labor. So probably carrying rocks from one place to another for no reason at all, which is no
It's-
joke. Something that happened to a Christian friend of mine at a Christian summer camp, where he had a punishment for breaking the rules. They made him carry rocks from one location to another for no reason all day long.
I think it's pronounced Manuel labor, and as someone who's married to a Latin person, I feel like you should have known that. So here's what ends up happening. A year later, Mr. Duggar, Josh Duggar, reoffends. Apparently, he inappropriately touched a young girl who was sitting on his lap, and he touched somebody in their family laundry room. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Duggars, they have at one point, I think they have 20 kids now. So they have a laundromat in their house. Like, when you tell me you touch somebody in a laundry room, I'm like, where do you have the space?
Yeah.
But that's not the case. He did it again. So for like a few months, he did manual labor, and it doesn't look like it. And I don't know that. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know that his intention was ever to be criminal. I simply think that he didn't have an outlet because he was homeschooled. He went to a small church where probably everyone his age was some sort of relative to him. He didn't have an appropriate outlet to, probably shared a room with a bunch of his siblings. Couldn't evacuate his ball sack.
His nether regions.
Yeah. So I'm not excusing his behavior. I'm just saying that, and later in the story, he does get arrested on CP charges also. So maybe he is just a broken person. I don't know. Or maybe he just developed the taste. I don't know. But it doesn't stop being gross.
Yeah, it's too bad, and I feel bad for the guy. I feel bad for Josh Duggar. I feel bad for his family members. I feel bad for the women he did this to. It just seems like nobody stepped in. There was no help offered or accountability really, or whatever counseling was done. I was almost surprised, I guess, to see the Christian response. I was looking for a stronger link to the church and what this means for the church, what the response should be. I saw a couple different outlets, Christian outlets, saying the response should be forgiveness. Forgiveness also with accountability. And he's in prison. He's serving a sentence. So I guess that part's being done too little too late. But I was kind of surprised to see people saying we should forgive. Now that's maybe seems like, why would that surprise you? That's what Christians are supposed to do. But this seems pretty heinous. And we've seen harsher condemnations come down from church leaders and ministry leaders for other scandals that were not as heinous as this.
Right.
So I was a little surprised to see people just being like, yeah, he should be held accountable, but we should forgive him.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think.
Like Ravi Zacharias got pretty post-mortem.
Yeah.
Got railed pretty hard. His ministry did. All these pastors stepping up saying, we disassociate, we completely condemn and disagree.
Right.
This is inappropriate. No forgiveness offered. While the guy's already dead too.
Right.
For still gross things.
Hey, he put those girls through school. Okay.
Yeah, and not perpetrated against minors, for what we know. So.
From what we know. So, again, if we got to choose here, I'm choosing my Uncle Ravi over this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does become interesting is the Duggar family continues to have a TV show with TLC and Discovery Networks, despite the fact that this stuff is becoming a little more, maybe not public to the public, but relevant. I mean, like this pertinent information is available to TLC, and you got to love the corporate press. They're just like, yeah, everybody in our industry is being inappropriate and touching children. And in 10 or 15 years, you're going to hear about this thing called Me Too. And we all are doing it. So what's the big deal? This kid did it. But what
I guess it was on par with other people who got exposed later as well.
Right. But what I was attempting to say earlier and maybe forgot to say was the IBOP and other groups like it and other kind of cloistered, closed off Christian groups have this thing where they would rather sweep something this gross under the rug than have people find out that that the illusion that they've created, that if you just follow these basic life principles, you don't watch television. Hey, this kid was homeschooled, never saw TV, and still he wanted to touch a booby, right? And you have to go without any external stimuli. This kid has a natural inclination towards something, and you don't provide, he's not in an environment where there is a release that would be more preferable, suboptimal in the context of the Christian faith, probably according to their theology, but certainly more preferable, right? If he went to a megachurch where the young ladies wore mini dresses and wedge and big pumps, okay, maybe he would have found a more appropriate place to get his rocks off as opposed to within his own household. I'm just saying that what happens.
Can only speculate.
Well, that's a speculation, of course. But I'm just saying that what happens when you create this like group where we're going to close ourselves off from everything else out there because we're going to solve the problem of people having evil desires. Hey, in the Bible, we say most Christians would say that you're born with evil desires. That's what we would. Most Christians would agree with that. Would you say so, Brett?
Most would, yes. Okay,
maybe you don't, but I'm saying most would.
Correct.
I think it would be fair to say that these people certainly think that, and they did everything that they could to prevent their kids from behaving like this, and it still happened. So the lesson, if I'm not finishing the show, I'm just saying the lesson is can't stop biology, baby. Can't stop.
No, right. But there are maybe good and bad ways to deal with it, and I'm going to get into a poor way of addressing it or of exacting blame.
Yeah.
So you're saying, hey, if maybe this guy just had another outlet, maybe if mom and dad would just let him take the long showers. We all know what happens in the long showers when you're a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Just let him take a long shower. Don't harass him. Don't kick him out of there.
Right. Can you just let the kid take the JCPenney catalog and hang out in the shed for 15 minutes? Maybe you wouldn't have lost your television show.
We don't know. But what I see on the other side of this is then blame. So we're saying, well, maybe if there was an outlet, things could have been different. Who knows? But what I think is interesting is blame. The blame that reportedly there's some blame being put on Josh's wife, Anna. Yes, some members in the church. There was a lady named Mary Murphy who was interviewed, who goes to this church and knew the family in some capacity. She was not saying this, but she was saying she had heard other women say, well, this all happened because Anna wasn't sexually satisfying Joshua. And if she had done a better job, he wouldn't have wanted to do the things he did.
But this started long before he got married to her, so oopsie daisy. He got married to Anna, who is still standing by her man. Okay.
Yes.
That is very similar to a former First Lady of Arkansas, whose name shall remain nameless because I like living, who later became a senator and ran for president unsuccessfully. So, not kidding. I'm just saying, she also stood by her man.
I wanted to rant. I wanted to rant on that a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to rant on this idea that somehow it's the women's job to sexually satisfy the man, and that's all she exists for in the conservative Christian context. Now, I don't completely disagree. I think in any marriage, it's both people's job to satisfy one another, and I think you should seek to do that quite regularly. But I don't like the idea that, well, if she had done a better job, you wouldn't have had this problem, right? Because some people have addictions. Some people have problems that, as you said, started a long time ago. And it does not matter what lady you bring in here, how attractive she is, what she does in the bedroom. This guy is still going to have this demon to battle with, I would bet. So let's not spread the blame on his poor wife who already has to deal with all the shit she has to deal with by saying, oh, if she had done a better job, maybe let him go in the back door or whatever, this wouldn't have happened. I mean, I don't think that's fair to her, and I don't think we should have a culture that reflects that as a concept.
Not at all. And I would also say, like, on some level, this dude clearly had an appetite for a lot, and by the way, had 7 kids before he was locked up in 2021. So,
right.
I mean, they got married in 2008.
Like he didn't like being with his wife.
Yeah. So, and as we find out later in the story, he was on Ashley Madison, cheating on his wife. So this series of abuse continues. There was a FOIA request, which is a Freedom of Information Act, which I will go as far to say there was a police report from when he was a minor. That I don't know law. I'm not an attorney anymore. I've been disbarred. But I would say that, that to me shouldn't be something that is public, but it was. And it just keeps getting worse. This thing keeps spiraling. It turns out he was on this website called Ashley Madison, which used to be this website that helps you cheat. Now, it's not as good as the website I'm building that helps you cheat, where we create fake invoices, text messages, emails. So when you tell your wife you're at a conference, the conference actually has a website she can go to. She can see the speakers, all of which are fake. We charge a very low
We're
retention.
actually putting on a conference, just the whole conference is fake.
Correct. And the entire conference is where you go to meet somebody to cheat with. And we provide the correct documents for your tax write-offs. So it's going to be the best real estate conference in all of Tampa, Florida. But it just continues to devolve, and at some point, it goes public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It did.
And
I don't know what else to say.
Now, this goes all the way back to 2015. Okay. Now, Josh isn't put into prison until 2021. So there's this long, drawn out thing where we think, like, we're the public who's nominally paying attention to the story. TLC cancels the show. Oprah cancels their interview to talk about all this stuff. TLC picked up a new show, says Counting On, with the 2 sisters that were named as Josh's victims. Don't know if the other sisters were also whatever. Really unfortunate. I feel really terrible for those gals that they didn't do anything wrong. And so TLC gives them a show. But when it turns out that Josh is arrested for CP and that it's even worse than people had initially thought, they cancel that show too. It's like, hold on. They didn't even do anything wrong.
Give them a break.
They're the victims. Now, I think it's one of these sisters, or maybe a different one. There's 19 of them. How's one to keep track? One of them left the IBLP or whatever that thing is called. She said she went to the conference and she was wearing makeup and then realized that she didn't believe in any of that stuff. And so she started deconstructing and now just probably goes to some mega church somewhere, wherever she lives. But
That's what happens when you deconstruct from a cult. You just go to a mega church.
yeah, it's like when people who leave the Mormon church and then they just show up at a regular church. It's just like, oh, buddy.
They're just Catholics now.
Yeah. There's Leah Remini, the actress. She was part of a church. I won't even say the name of the church because that's how scared of those people I am. They're not Christian. And then she became Catholic, and she was doing Joe Rogan's show, and he goes, "Hold on a minute. So you're part of this religion, and they have all these weird rules, and a lot of celebrities are a part of it, and then you leave that and you go become Catholic because that's less scandalous." And it is less scandalous. But yeah, so ultimately, uh, this just keeps getting worse. And but some of this behavior, as I keep getting back to, is like it's bad, but in a context where it's a willing participant of a similar age and not a family member, even in Arkansas, not really that, not really. We're never doing an episode about a regular guy being like, we're never going to do an episode about John Christ, at least as far as whatever we know about John Christ. Because
Why not? It'd be great.
What's that?
Why not? It'd be great to do an episode on.
His scandal wasn't even a scandal. Here was his scandal. He
got canceled.
He was in his like early 30s. The most scandalous thing he did was try to rollerblade with a girl. That was the most scandalous thing. I mean, so
wasn't she like 14 though?
No, all of the people he was dealing with were adults.
No.
The scandal was that one of them was in the middle of getting divorced, and he was like, "Send me pictures of your nip." And it's like, "Hey, bud, there are free nipple pictures on the internet, and don't have to ask for them from married women." But whatever.
Danny, as we continue on these scandal episodes and people get canceled, and your Bible verse, whatever is done in the darkness shall come to light, comes up every single time.
Right.
I have a question for you.
Correct.
Do you believe that sin is sin? Meaning there is no one sin that is greater than any other sin, so on and so forth.
Yes.
Other than the, blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which we're not really sure what that is, but the Bible mentions that's the unforgivable sin.
Right, which we're never trying to do here, that's for sure. I do believe it's all just the same thing.
It's all the same?
I would say that it all aggrieves God the same, but living in the real world, there's practical consequences. So I think the practical consequences for everything is different. I think the practical consequence for drunkenness is that you wake up in the morning and you have trouble not functioning. And I think the consequences for other sins, such as inappropriate touching of somebody, is prison. And in life, you have to compare what's worse. That doesn't, the eternal consequences might be all the same, but the earthly consequences are different.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Why do you ask? How do you feel?
I was just curious, like, because when we talk about these scandals, in my mind, some are certainly worse than others.
Right.
So, in terms of what it does to people. So if you're, I don't know, we haven't done really have we done an embezzlement one yet?
No.
Not yet. No, I won't use that as an example. But if you're Mark Driscoll and you're just kind of being a dick to people,
right,
versus you're Josh Duggar and you're actually using your dick on people, I think one's a little bit worse than the other.
Correct.
And certainly the worldly consequences are going to be more severe for one over the other. But yeah, I think if God could punch you in the face, he would punch Josh Duggar a little bit harder than he would punch Mark Driscoll.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an unfair.
We serve a loving God, not a UFC God, but I kind of like a UFC God.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if there isn't a little bit of Dana White in the Christ, isn't that? Yeah, I guess. But what you're saying is probably not unreasonable. Although I don't. And here's the reality: I don't know why I hold that view. I don't know that it's necessarily the biblical one. I just know it's the one that I heard in church more, so it's the one that I've accepted. Because if that's not the case, because if it is not the case that it's simply all the same, I'm a little worried. I'm a lot worried. So for my own peace, happiness, and prosperity, I go with it's all the same.
It's all the same. Manipulate me, daddy.
That's right. Well, I have to go because somebody who owes me money is going to get beat with a sock full of nickels. So
good luck
I'm
with
kidding.
that.
Hey, before we go, I just want to say two things. I want to say, again, a thank you to Scriptural Skinny Jeans. I want you guys to check them out. And just closing us off, I just want to say, with peace and love, Brett, you're canceled.
Oh, that was very sweet of you. Don't touch me.
Okay.
Danny?
Yep.
I think that you should go in peace, serve the Lord, and be canceled.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We did it.
We'll see you next time on Church is Canceled.
That's right.